40,000 years ago, a massive female bear climbs toward the cave where she once spent the winter. She knows this slope, the smell of wet stone, and the narrow entrance. Inside, it should be dark, cold, and safe. But now smoke drifts from the depths. Firelight trembles across the walls, while split bones and stone tools lie near the entrance. The female stops and slowly draws in the unfamiliar scent. To humans, this is merely a convenient shelter. To her, it is the place without which the coming winter may become her last. Cave bears were stronger than any human in close combat. They survived cold, hunger, and long months of hibernation. Their bones have been found from Spain to the Urals, Siberia, and the Altai. It seemed that animals like these should survive any change. Yet they disappeared, while the smaller brown bears remained. To understand why, we must look beyond the strength of the animal. We must understand why its entire life depended on a small number of dark openings in the rock. In the places that had offered safety for thousands of years, a struggle began that no single bear could win. The late Pleistocene was not one endless frozen winter. Cold periods and milder intervals repeatedly replaced one another, transforming forests, grasslands, and mountain valleys. Where grasses and shrubs had recently grown, open and frigid landscapes appeared. Later, vegetation returned, but often in a different form. For the cave bear, this was crucial. Despite their enormous bodies and powerful fangs, many populations relied mainly on plant food. Their teeth were adapted for grinding tough stems, roots, and leaves. Their diets may have varied in some regions, but plants remained the foundation for many groups. During the short summer, each animal had to build an enormous reserve of fat. That reserve had to sustain its body through the winter, when the bear ate almost nothing and remained inside a cave for months. One poor season did not necessarily kill a healthy adult, but several difficult years in succession meant less fat, fewer cubs, and more animals dying during hibernation. Climate did not strike the bears through cold alone. It took away their food before winter had even begun. Each autumn, the females still returned to the familiar den. This was more than simple habit. Studies of ancient DNA suggest that cave bear groups may have been closely tied to particular caves, returning to them for generation after generation. Inside, the temperature remained stable. There was no wind, and deep chambers offered protection from predators. Cubs were born there. Old animals entered those caves for their final winter. The accumulation of bones across cave floors does not necessarily indicate a single mass death. They may have collected over centuries as bears naturally died during hibernation. But this loyalty turned their shelters into traps. Suitable caves were far rarer than forests or valleys. If an entrance collapsed, became occupied by lions, or was claimed by humans, the bear could not simply dig an equally secure den nearby. Brown bears were more adaptable. They could hibernate in shallow shelters, narrow crevices, or dens dug into the ground. Cave bears depended on a permanent address, and when the struggle for that address began, their enormous size stopped being an advantage. Humans did not enter the caves as a united army driving bears from all of Europe. At first, they appeared as occasional Neanderthal camps. Later, modern humans occupied these shelters more frequently. They also needed dry entrances, protection from the wind, and a place to maintain a fire. A group might remain inside a cave for only one season, but even a single lost winter could be dangerous for a bear. At some archaeological sites, bones carry butchery marks and other evidence that people killed cave bears. Yet archaeology has not revealed mass hunting on a scale that could have destroyed the entire species by itself. The real danger was more subtle. Humans did not need to kill every bear. They only needed to appear repeatedly near cave entrances, keep fires burning, leave their scent behind, and prevent females from hibernating safely. The bear could leave, but another shelter might be farther away, colder, or already occupied. Even occasional hunting became devastating once the population had begun to decline. Competition for a limited number of safe places slowly placed pressure on an entire species, almost invisibly within the span of a single human lifetime. Ancient DNA has preserved something that individual bones cannot show. Cave bear populations began declining long before the species finally disappeared. A particularly severe reduction occurred around 40,000 years ago, as modern humans were spreading across Europe. This overlap does not prove that humans were the only cause, but it does not fit the simple explanation that one sudden period of warming destroyed the bears. In fact, the final stage of their history unfolded as the last glacial maximum approached, when conditions were becoming colder and productive areas of vegetation were breaking into isolated fragments. It is therefore more accurate to speak of climatic instability rather than warming as a single fatal blow. Rapid fluctuations changed plant communities, disrupted familiar routes, and left suitable habitats scattered like islands. Humans may not have created the crisis, but they entered it precisely when cave bears were already losing places to retreat. Every occupied cave entrance now mattered far more than it had before. Genetic weakening was not a mysterious disease that suddenly destroyed the giants. When a population shrinks and breaks into small, isolated groups, rare genetic lineages vanish, and closely related animals are more likely to reproduce with one another. Genetic diversity declines. This does not always kill a species immediately, but it reduces its ability to withstand disease, poor seasons, and environmental change. Cave bears faded over thousands of years. An adult male could still weigh hundreds of kilograms and remain an intimidating animal. But the strength of each individual body concealed the weakness of the population as a whole. Cubs were produced slowly. Females spent enormous energy on hibernation, birth, and milk. The loss of only a few adult females could affect the population for many years. Even a small group of hunters could cause disproportionate damage if they killed vulnerable animals inside their dens. Hunting, disturbance near cave entrances, and food shortages therefore reinforced one another rather than acting as separate explanations. Each pressure made the next one more dangerous, until population recovery became nearly impossible. Now return to the female standing outside the cave. We cannot know whether this exact encounter ever occurred, but similar confrontations almost certainly happened in many valleys. She smells the smoke and retreats. Little time remains before the arrival of lasting cold. There is another hollow on the neighboring slope, but its entrance is too exposed. A larger cave lies deeper in the mountains, yet reaching it would require energy she may no longer possess. If she enters the occupied shelter, she may face spears, fire, and shouting. If she remains outside, the cold will force her body to burn fat more quickly. Even if she survives this winter, her cubs may not survive the next. This is what extinction looks like from close range. Not one great battle, not one sudden catastrophe. It is a chain of small defeats, an inaccessible cave, a poor summer, a dead cub, another isolated group that leaves no descendants. In Earth's geological record, thousands of years separate these events. For the animal itself, everything is decided at one dark entrance before the first snow begins to fall. The last stable populations disappeared roughly 28 to 26,000 years ago, although isolated groups may have survived somewhat longer. By the beginning of the most severe phase of the Ice Age, the species was already fragmented and weakened. Scientists still debate the importance of each factor because different regions preserve different evidence. In some places, the greatest threat may have been the loss of plant food. Elsewhere, it may have been humans and competition for caves. In other regions, the decisive force may have been the combination of cold, isolation, and low population numbers. But the broader conclusion is becoming clearer. Cave bears were not destroyed by one cause. They were destroyed by a specialization that had been successful for too long. Their enormous bodies, plant-based diet, and loyalty to deep caves worked in a relatively stable world. When the environment began changing in several directions at once, those advantages became limitations. The last cave was not merely a shelter, it became the boundary beyond which the species had no remaining solutions. The story of these giants reminds us that extinction does not only take the weak. Sometimes the first to disappear are those least able to change the way they survive.